episode of What If Mob Psycho was in UA High School. Or whichever one you prefer. I prefer was in MHA or was in UA High. I don't know, it doesn't really matter that much. In this series, we're going to be taking Mob Psycho from Mob Psycho 100 and dropping him into the My Academia universe. I've explained this before, but his powers will be still the psychic abilities that he had in the original. He will still have the full 100% Mob Psycho getting mad thing and all that stuff. This video series is completely unscripted. The first part I did for this, or the part 0 I did for this, was completely unscripted, and I want to keep it that way because I don't really have any other unscripted series on my channel, and I really want to do unscripted series so I have more content to post. I'm gonna try to get this to like an hour long. I don't really know how I'm really gonna do that. I'm probably gonna do some sprites, it's gonna be really lightly edited, not gonna be heavily edited on like some crazy editing stuff. So if you're expecting like some crazy like editing like I do for like a lot of my other series, I'm sorry, but this is just gonna be like more of an audio based series. I'm probably gonna do like some anime clips here and there, maybe you know, some After Effects, maybe like the some stuff. I'm gonna do some stuff, but it's not gonna be like super in-depth and super crazy editing like What If Deku was an Aji, you know, What If Asta had the rinnegan or something like that. It's gonna be more along the lines of What If Deku was a crime lord. No editing basically, but just straight audio. Hopefully that is good for you guys, and hopefully by this point I have uploaded What If Asta had the Force episode 1, because if I haven't, here's your explanation. The original video got deleted, and that set me back so hard. I accidentally dropped a lot of files into the recycling bin on my computer, and I emptied the recycling bin. Before I even realized what I did, it was too late. What If Asta had the Force, was in the recycling bin with all the other junk that I wanted to throw away, and I lost a full 25-minute video, including the audio and including the file that I used to edit all of it. So I have to really edit everything from scratch, and I don't know if it's ever going to be the same. Hopefully it is the same. Hopefully I re-edited it and posted it by the time that I posted this. If not, you guys know why, and if not, Happy New Year's. Anyway, for this series, I think we're gonna go straight into it with, you know, some explanation of why Mob wants to go to UA. Sorry if this is very odd. My first time really recording an unscripted video in a while. Mob Psycho is, you know, a strange child. He's still really shy and odd in this My Academia universe. I think I explained that in part 0, but he comes up the same exact way he does. And he has his brother, except he has extremely powerful quirk called Psychic. This quirk is the exact same as his psychic abilities. Psychic allows him to do everything that his psychic abilities allowed him to do in the original Mob Psycho 100 series. There are other people in this My Academia universe who have the quirk Psychic. It's not an exclusive quirk for some reason. It's like a fire quirk, where a lot of people have the fire quirk that Endeavor has in different forms. So a lot of people have this quirk Psychic in different forms. So that can explain a lot of the Mob Psycho 100 powers. His brother, however, is quirklet. He comes up quirklet just like he would in the Mob Psycho universe, thinking that he wasn't a psychic, while his brother had all this power. His brother had so much power, he could barely even control it himself. And at school, he would really become a star student. Mob's brother would try to shine in ways that only he could, trying to prove something to himself and to Mob, that he could be special even though he didn't have a quirk. You see, Mob's brother is actually very similar to Deku, except for he's way cooler than Deku. You see, Deku would get bullied, while Mob's brother, he would get celebrated. He would get all the attention from all the other students and the girls. Mob, however, would go through middle school a lot like he did in Mob Psycho. Shy, unintimidating. He would constantly get picked on just to slap people away with his psychic abilities. Until one day, he noticed a girl. You see, now this girl, we're gonna say that she is Uraraka. We're gonna say that Mob and his brother went to the same middle school as Uraraka. Yes. That's crazy, I know. But Mob notices Uraraka one day and is intensely intrigued by her. You see, I don't know what it was about Uraraka, but Mob couldn't stop focusing on her for some reason. And wanting to be near her and wanting to talk to her caused Mob to create new goals. Mob would then join a club to become more social and learn how to talk to people. The club that he would join would be the Athletics Association Club, the same club he would join in the original Mob Psycho 100 series. You see, now Mob would be working out with people who had crazy quirks that would allow them to increase their physical strength tenfold. So Mob would be extremely behind. But the guys at this club and the guys at his middle school in general were not like the guys at Deku's middle school. They were chill people, really cool, and they helped Mob out in any way they could. They would help Mob with simple tasks like leading him while he was running, while he was jogging, helping him with equipment, teaching him how to lift, things like that. But Mob still would not grow any muscle mass. It was really hard for him to grow physically because of his mental capabilities. He was so good psychically that his physical abilities were just playing third fiddle to everything else going on in his body. So no matter how hard he trained or anything like that, he just couldn't break through. But Mob wasn't gonna stop. He was now in love with physical fitness, even though he himself was not physically fit. And his brother saw Mob as a waste of his abilities. His brother kept on thinking, what would he do if he had Mob's abilities? He would be a hero by now. You see, Mob is a prodigy by all meanings of the word. He is a super prodigy. He can literally save the entire planet if he really wanted to. But Mob doesn't see his abilities as a gift. He notices them more as a hindrance. He thinks if he wasn't psychic, he could have been able to muster up enough confidence to go ahead and talk to Uraraka. But he's so scared that he might do something stupid with his abilities that he's shy and he stays away from her. Mob and his brother would strain their relationship along the way through middle school, as Mob started to see his brother as jealous, and Mob's brother started to see Mob as a fool. Who the hell would train their physical fitness if they were able to move a building with their mind? Mob's brother hated the fact that Mob would not use his powers for good, or would not use his powers for at least self-gratifying reasons. Mob's brother would bring this up to his mother and father while they were having dinner at one point in time. He would say, "Why the hell haven't you guys pushed Mob into becoming a hero yet? He has one of the greatest quirks I've ever seen in my life, and you're gonna let him waste his potential and squander it for no reason." You see, the guy's so stupid, he's even doing physical fitness now. He doesn't have to. He can push up anything he would possibly need to with his mind. Now, Mob's parents are really laid back. They don't really take the hands-on approach with parenting like a lot of the other parents in the My Academia universe do. They let their kids figure it out for themselves, as their kids are super powered anyway. What could they really tell Mob when he can blow up an entire, building with his head? So what can they really tell him? But Mob's father, he had enough. He slams the table saying to Mob's brother that you're not Mob. You can't tell him what to do. This is a decision that he needs to make for himself. And then he turns to Mob saying, "And I kinda agree with your brother, Mob. I feel like you're wasting your potential. I know we never talk about your abilities because they're so extremely strong and odd, but you have a gift. And I don't care how much you hate it. I think you should push to be a hero." Mob was never interested in such things though. He always thought them as self-gratifying and odd. Who would want to be a hero? I mean, it's dangerous. But Mob, he didn't get it. Mob's mother then interjects saying, "Calm down," to her Mob's father, and she then said to Mob, "Listen, I understand why you don't want to be a hero, but you owe it to everybody else to use your abilities for good. I think you should apply at UA." She then pulls out an application from her purse that she had been keeping there for probably weeks on end. She pulls it out, putting it on the table, sliding it towards Mob, saying, "This is an application to the best hero course in the entirety of Japan. If you sign this and get into UA, you can be on the track to becoming one of the best heroes. Please, Mob, would you at least consider it? Please, for your family at least." Mob sighed, thinking, why the hell was everybody pushing him to become a hero? Mob had never even thought of becoming a hero before. He always really thought of it as stupid. He sighs, taking the slip of paper that his mom had just passed him. He then says, "If that'll make you guys happy, I don't really want to become a hero. I never did," in his usual monotone voice. He says, "Okay, I'll apply, But that's all. I'll apply. If I don't get in, it's the end of the story. I'm not becoming a hero because you guys want me to. He sighs, getting up from the table and walking away. This was all really out of character for Mob. He's usually monotone, odd, and really well kept. But something inside of him bursted out, and his meter went up. It went up from the 0 to a now 25% full. We skip past all of that, and we're enjoying another day in Mob and Uraraka's middle school. I'm probably gonna cut that. I don't really want to cut that. Sorry guys. I'm gonna cut that. Am I gonna cut this? So we're 11 minutes in. Okay. We skip to another day in Mob and Uraraka's middle school. Mob sees Uraraka jogging past. Mob sees Uraraka walking past while he's doing his daily jog for the physical fitness club. And he gets immediately scared because she's walking past on the same path that he's jogging on. He gets scared, ducking, hiding beneath a hill, watching her walk past him. But she notices him. That's odd, she thinks, and she turns around. Being the social person she is, she yells out, "Hey kid, what are you doing?" Mob pops up, awkwardly saying hi in his usual weird monotone voice. She looks at Mob, looking him up and down, turns around, and walks away. Mob was really odd, and she didn't want to be involved in anything that kid was doing. Mob had ruined it. Being on that hill had messed up his white t-shirt. He had green stuff all over it, grass, dirt, and mud from hiding beneath that hill. I can't believe he would do something so stupid. And he missed up his chance to talk to Uraraka. Damn it. His life was now shattering everything. He had messed up his physical fitness club uniform and messed up his chance to be social with his crush. Mob would go home that day, super sad, and he would do it. He would enter his room, grab that slip of paper that his mom passed to him the other day, and apply for UA High. He would give that slip to his mom at dinner that day, and his family would be so proud. Everyone except for his brother, who just scoffed at him, saying, "Finally, if I were you, I would have applied when I was 10 years old." Mob sighed, saying, "But you're not me." That really hit his brother, but he couldn't show it. He had to be the cool, calculated, super genius that he always was to Mob. He had to be the big brother, little brother. But Mob, he didn't notice anything wrong with his brother. His brother had always been this way. He didn't really notice that his brother had started to self-loathe himself, that his brother had started to beat on himself for not having a quirk. His brother would now begin to try and bend spoons with his mind, like Mob would try and bend spoons with his mind. But his brother was never able to. His brother would smash his head against walls trying to use the same abilities as Mob, but his brother was never able to. But he kept on pushing. Mob would never notice. Mob would go on with his day. You see, after this point, we're gonna skip past a lot. Mob would never get social with Uraraka in middle school. He would never get physically fit in middle school either. But I think he would enjoy his time in middle school a lot. Similarly to the Mob that we know in canon, he would really love the down-to-earth, just everyday feel of going to school and doing his clubs, seeing Uraraka walk past and acting weird. Something about it was so calm to him. So normal, so slow, and he loved the pace of his life at this point. But everything was going to change. On the final day of school, he would get home. His brother would scoff at him like usual, calling him a waste of potential. As they ate dinner, somebody would knock on the door. They get a letter. Mob's mother would bring it back, sit down at the table, and open said letter. She immediately began to get excited, looking at Mob's father, putting her hand on his shoulders, shaking it intensely. Mob's father knew what that meant. Mob's brother knew what that meant. But Mob was completely clueless. She then began to open up the letter, shaking with excitement. She said, "Mob, it's for you." Mob was like, "What?" You see, at this point he had remembered anything. He had remembered nothing that had happened in the last few weeks, as he was getting so settled into his daily routine. Mob's mother would bring out a slit of paper out of that letter, and at the back of that slit, something that Mob could clearly see was a big UA High School logo. Mob's face now fell to the ground. Mob's mother then said, "Mob, you did it! You made it to the UA entrance exam! You did it! You can get into UA, Mob! You've done it! All you have to do now is pass the entrance exam!" Mob's father stood up out of his chair, starting to clap, and Mob's brother just sat there scoffing. He looked at Mob with a little smile on his face, saying, "Good job, idiot." Mob sighed. He didn't really want to go to UA. He was just doing it to keep everybody in his family happy. But I guess now that he has to do this stupid stuff, he has to participate in the dumb entrance exam at so much effort for so little a reason. He didn't want to become a hero. His family was forcing him into it. Mob sighed, saying, Okay, but why do I have to now do an entrance exam? I thought I already applied." Mob's mother said, "That's not how getting into UA works, Mob. You see, if you want to get into UA High, you have to apply and then you get to go into the entrance exam. After you pass the entrance exams, that's when you get to become a UA High student." Mob's brother then says, "There are 3 different classes in UA High, Mob. Class A, Class B, Class C, and Class D." What? Why are you just saying the alphabet, Mob rebuttals with? Okay. Classes A are the greatest class you can probably be in, Mob. Classes A are the classes that people like All Might, Endeavor, and Best Genius were in. Top tier heroes were always in Class A, Mob. You should try to shoot to get into that class. So, you're telling me that the other classes are just lower tier heroes? No, not really. You see, Class B is another hero studies class. Those are like secondary heroes. Heroes like Midnight. Heroes like... Heroes like Backdraft and heroes like Earjet all went to Class 1B. But there are another subset of classes, and I think you should not aim for anything below B. If you get anything below B, Mob, you are a failure. You should really be in Class S or something like that, but I don't know. Knowing you, you'll probably find a way to screw it up. You have all the potential in the world, Mob. Don't throw it away. Mob's brother then began to stand up. He grabbed a spoon and left. Mob sighed, saying, "Damn it, now I have to go through all this effort." Mob would get up, walking away angry that his mother had talked him into doing such a strenuous activity. He would go to sleep that day, prepared for the UA entrance exam. The next day, Mob would wake up, ready for the UA entrance exam. He cracked his neck, cracked his knuckles, and ate toast for breakfast. Mob was a very simple guy. He didn't do anything special that day. He walked out, grabbing his backpack, and headed towards UA High. As soon as he got there, he was ecstatic. He was like, what the hell was this building? And why the hell was he here? He almost felt like he didn't fit. That's when he would see a weird green-haired boy walking by him. This boy would trip only when Mob would reach out with his psychic abilities to try and grab the boy and stop him from falling. When Uraraka would intervene using her abilities to help the boy float, Mob would stop. He had never shown Uraraka his strange abilities before, and he wouldn't start now. Mob would realize that Uraraka would want to get into UA High, which would push him even more to want to get into UA High. He saw Deku and Uraraka interact, and he would hide, just watching them talk to each other. Mob was now ecstatic. As soon as Deku and Uraraka walked into UA, Mob came from whatever alleyway he was hiding in and walked into UA as well. He skipped into there actually. He was really happy to see Uraraka wanted to go to the same school as him. So he would walk in, hoping that he would be able to get into the same class as Uraraka. He heeded what his brother said. The better you do on the exam, the higher chances of you being in a better class, he thought. So all he had to do was just do really good on the exam. Mob was never the super genius his brother was. Mob wasn't even as smart as Deku. So the written part of the exam was actually going to be pretty hard for him, honestly. I think that Deku would, have no problem with it, but I think that Mob would have a huge problem with it. Honestly, he would kind of struggle, and he would try to use his abilities to cheat for the first time in his life, but it wouldn't work. He couldn't find anybody to cheat off of, especially since he and Deku were split up. So nobody really had the super genius that would help him pass like that anyway. Mob would flunk on that test. I don't think he would even do decently well. He would just barely pass, in my humble opinion. But Mob would go on, not afraid and not ashamed. It was time for a portion of the exam that he could really shine in. The UA Entrance Exam Combat Test. This test with all the robots. Remember guys, this is something that Mob can really shine in. See, now I'm gonna put Mob on Bakugo's team. I don't think Mob, Deku, and Uraraka would be a good fit for the series. So I want to separate Mob, Deku, and Uraraka for the time being, putting him on the same entrance exam as Bakugo did. I believe that Mob, without understanding the rules and everything, just destroying as much 0-point robots as possible, would see this as an amazing opportunity. If he can go crazy on these 0-point robots, crazy on these robots, not the 0-point robot, go crazy on these robots and destroy as much of them as possible, he could really impress Uraraka. So Mob went all out, destroying a lot of robots. As soon as the bell rang for him to go and start this exam, Mob would burst off. Using his psychic abilities, he destroyed a bunch of robots. A bunch. Mob destroyed robots while running towards the end goal. Mob was quick. He used his psychic abilities to hover, and he surprised everybody there. See, now they were all staring at Mob, because what Mob didn't notice was that he was a spectacular specimen. Mob was flowing through the air. His hair now flew back. Like, when Mob powers up, when his hair flows back, he looks really sick and cool, and everybody was in awe of him. Even Bakugo had to take 2 takes at this show off of a kid. And that's when the 0-point robot would appear. Now, I believe that Mob would see the 0-point robot as a chance, for him to prove himself even more. Mob was not scared of it like everybody else. While everybody else ran away, even Bakugo ran away, Mob stepped up. He knew the full extent of his abilities, and he could take care of this thing no problem. Mob would put his hand out, raising his power level, and that's when he would do it. He would squeeze his hand, and the inside of that robot would squeeze as well. Using his psychic powers, he pushed the robot back, disemboweling it, limb by limb, little robot intestine by little robot intestine. He pulled out the wires from the inside, and the robot would drop onto the side of one of the great buildings of the UA entrance exam. It then slumped itself over, scraping the buildings as it fell to an extreme calamity. It fell, and the whiplash from it falling blew everyone but Mob back a few bits. Everyone was now in awe as Mob stood right in front of the rubble, smiling. He then hovered as the UA entrance exam ended. As we all can tell, Mob knocked it out of the park, but Mob wouldn't know that until a few weeks later. As summer break began, he would get home after the UA entrance exam, and he would be ecstatic to tell his family that he saw Uraraka at the entrance exam. And everyone would sigh saying, "But how did you do, Mob?" And Mob shrugged saying, "I don't know, okay? I took down a few robots, I guess." His brother was extremely disappointed. His father was disappointed and his mother was disappointed. What they didn't know was that Mob knocked the entrance exam out of the park. Mob would go on during that summer to just train his physical fitness. He thought that he would try his best to get physically fit and impress Uraraka, because that kid that he saw, Deku was kind of ripped at this point. This was after he did a little bit of training, not a lot of training with All Might, just a little bit of training, when he got super ripped so we can get One for All in the first place. Yeah, now Deku was ripped. And Mob was, Mob. He had no muscle on him. He was just the flab called Mob. And he thought that maybe Uraraka wanted to talk to Deku because, I don't know, he had muscles. So Mob would just go on with his physical fitness training. By month 2 of the summer break, when there was only a few weeks left, that's when Mob would get his UA entrance exam tape brought to him. In a very similar fashion to Deku, Mob would get All Might on the tape telling him how much of a good job he did. He said that they had broken the records. He said that he did even better than another student who had beaten the 0-point robot, Deku. You see, everything with Deku goes as canon. We're not gonna let Mob's side of the story really disrupt Deku's side of the story. This story is about kind of the both of them, even though I want to focus more on Mob for the time being. So now that Mob was, really excited that he had got into UA so we could finally see Uraraka, his family was ecstatic as well. They didn't know that Mob had done so well. And his brother scolded Mob saying, "Why couldn't you give us a better explanation of the situation that was going down there, Mob? Why did you have to say that you just did okay, I guess? You see, this is why you are a waste of your potential, Mob. If you focused more, you would be able to tell us everything that happened in the exam. But no, you didn't." Mob just sighed saying, whatever. He walked into his room, trying to keep a low profile. But when he got in there, he couldn't help but screech. He was finally going to be able to see Uraraka again after all this time. Another 2 weeks passed, and the end of summer break happened. Mob was still not physically fit by the end of it. Even though he had been doing push-ups in his room for months, he still wasn't on the level of that ripped kid that he saw the other day. Mob would now be in class 1A. I think he would get a spot in class 1A easily. I think he would be an additional spot. We can add him on to the already 20 plus students that are in class 1A. So let's just say that everybody that's in class 1A is still in class 1A. We're not going to get rid of anybody to give Mob a spot, but we're just going to tack Mob onto, the 20 plus kids that are already in UA or class 1A. We're just gonna tack Mob onto that. So Mob is in Uraraka's class. However, he doesn't know it until he pulls up to school in that fresh UA uniform. You see, now Mob is really clean in this UA uniform. I think you can imagine him. He would be super clean in that. And with his hair combed forward, he would look really cool. But if he let his hair go, when he powers up, he would look sick. But he doesn't. He just has that same bowl cut that Mob always has. He looks pretty clean though. He would walk to school, walking in class, excited to see Uraraka. As soon as he opened the door, he saw her. Uraraka. She was talking to Deku and Ida and Bakugo. He was being a nuisance as usual. Mob would walk in the last person to enter class, even later than Deku. And everybody was now in awe. Everybody was freaking out over Deku because he smashed the hell out of the 0-point robot. But Mob, he did something entirely different. He didn't just smash the 0-point robot, he demolished it from the inside. He pulled out the wires of the robot. He disassembled it. He was like a Superman at that UA entrance exam. Everybody's eyes turned on him. Away from Deku, he drew all the attention at that moment. Everybody was staring at him. And Mob, he just couldn't take it. He wasn't a social person. He ducked his head and just walked in the classroom. Putting up his hand, he said, "Hi." And Uraraka noticed him. He's that weird guy from her middle school. She walked up to him saying, "Hey, Mob." Twisting her head, looking up at him as he had his head down. They made direct eye contact. and that scared the hell out of Mob. Mob was then rushed, put in a circle by everybody, especially Ida, who couldn't stop blabbering his mouth asking Mob questions. Deku was extremely intrigued by Mob too. Even Bakugo wanted to know more about this guy, cause he saw him do it. He was there when he saw Mob disassemble that 0-point robot. Everyone gathered around Mob, starting to talk, and Mob was really flustered. You imagine Deku when everybody gathered around him, but even worse, Mob couldn't even get out a word. Every time a person would ask a question, he would just be like, He was a real social butterfly, wasn't he? He couldn't really interact with anybody there. They rushed him, and Uraraka noticed something. This kid wasn't weird. He was just socially awkward. Uraraka noticed that, looks at Deku, as Deku notices it, and they both twist their heads at each other. That's when Aizawa would walk in. Stopping all this commotion, he says, "Hey, kids, calm down." And we go through the exact same Aizawa pain as in canon. Aizawa explains everything about the little exam that they were due before they could start the year. If anybody would lose this exam, they would get kicked out of class one day. Blah blah blah, blah 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 blah. Shut up, Aizawa, let's get on to it. I think we all know that Mob would really smash everything except for the physical exams. Mob and the speed and stuff, he wouldn't really use his quirk, as he was really opposed to using his abilities. Aizawa noticed that in him automatically, and he would tell Mob, if you're not going to use your quirk, you might as well get out of UA. Aizawa says the same thing to Deku, which intrigues Mob because he says something similar to Mob. I think Deku and Mob would actually be in a very similar situation, as they both have too much power for their own goods, but Mob wouldn't notice it. Deku, however, would notice it off the rip, and Deku would try to become friends with Mob, but since Mob was so socially awkward, he just kept on distancing himself, but Deku wouldn't stop pushing. Uraraka, which gave Mob this huge sense of achievement because he finally stepped out of his shell and was able to eat lunch next to Uraraka. Of course, the whole Deku gang is still there, and for the first few days of UA, everything goes like in canon. We're gonna skip past all of that as we have a lot of story to cover. We're gonna go directly into the All Might test, the first combat test that they ever did in UA High, the one where Deku would smash Bakugo over his head. Yeah, that one. But before even that begins, we have to figure out which squad Mob's gonna be on. You can make an argument that Mob belongs on any squad in this test. I mean, he's an entirely additional character, so we could really go on any team here. But I'm deciding that I want to tag Mob with Uraraka. That's right. This kind of changes everything. I really wanted to tag Mob in with Uraraka because I really wanted to see how the relationship would go. I think that Mob with Uraraka in this test, he would try his best not to flex his psychic abilities because he didn't want to seem like, a show-off, or he didn't want to outshadow Uraraka's shine. So he would try his best to let Uraraka take the reins, while awkwardly mumbling out words trying to get her attention at the same time. Mob was really not good at this part of the test. We're gonna say that he goes up against Bakugo and Ida. So that means that Deku would be going up against someone else. I think Deku would fare well enough against anybody else. You could make an argument that he wouldn't pass this test, but we're just gonna go ahead and give Deku the W off rip, so we can focus on what Mob and Uraraka are gonna do together. So Mob, Uraraka versus Bakugo and Ida. I think that would be an amazing matchup to watch, as Mob tries to hide his psychic abilities and nerf his powers. All Might would notice that Mob was not going all out. He realizing the same thing that Aizawa realized, that this kid is somehow afraid of his power or doesn't want to use his power for some reason. He keeps it on the low, using his abilities to try his best to help Uraraka go through all of this and tag in the bomb so she can save everyone or pass the test or whatever, but Mob wasn't really taking the reins like he should have. I mean, with all honesty, Mob could probably ace this in a matter of seconds if he really tried. So Mob, Uraraka, and Ida would go at it. I think that Bakugo would still be on the advance and still attack even if Deku wasn't there, just because, well, he's Bakugo. So he would come charging in up against Mob while Uraraka was off sneaking trying to get the bomb. A similar situation to what happened with her and Deku, except for Mob and Uraraka had no plan whatsoever. They were completely winging it. So Deku would come up against Mob, not realizing how magnificently unmatched and this isn't even a match at this point. He's just not in Mob's league right now. So I think that Mob would easily use his psychic abilities to predict where Deku was going to attack. We'll keep on forgetting that another part of Mob's psychic abilities is that he basically has the senses of a Sharingan by just breathing air. So he would sense every one of Deku's attacks, sliding and sliding, trying to keep him at bay, but not trying to attract that much attention and glory, trying not to steal shine from Uraraka as she sneaks past Ida, having his mantic rant, and manages to touch the bomb without anything really happening. Bakugo was pissed at this point. What was wrong with this kid? He didn't even try to engage him in combat. And All Might was surprised. That was a hallmark of a true hero. Getting the job done with nobody injured, not even the villains. This kid was special, that's for sure. All Might would congratulate Mob, and the day would go on, like in canon. We can skip a lot of the other stuff because, as in canon, having Mob there would just make some stuff easier for some people who ended up squatting up or teaming up with Mob. Other than that, everything else would pretty much go like in canon, as Mob, Uraraka, Ida, and Deku start to form their kind of own clique. Bakugo goes off and does his own Bakugo thing, just like in canon. And we pull towards the main event of this entire episode, the USJ arc. So, Mob and the USJ, how would that go? I think that Mob being in the USJ obviously is a great help to the heroes' forces, the heroes and training's forces, and I think that Mob would be able to take down a slew of villains in this USJ arc, maybe even contend with Nobu. Not contend with Nobu. If he really wanted to, he could take Nobu out at the blink of an eye, but maybe he would contend with Nobu. So we're going to say that Mob is not going to be with Deku and Froppy. I would love to put him with that action, but I think that's a bit of a coincidence. Having him take Deku's spot in both of these tests would be kind of obnoxious of me. So I'm going to slide Mob away somewhere near Deku, but somewhere, far enough that he has to run towards Deku and Uraraka when the action starts to really go down. I think that Mob would be training by himself, training to flex his muscles more. Something that Aizawa would teach him is to use his eyes to track his opponents and use his psychic abilities and his vision as one. That seems like something that Mob would really actually need improving on, and that's an area that Mob can actually improve on. Even though he doesn't really need to do it, that's a spot for improvement for Mob. So that's where he would be, training by himself, doing some stuff in the USJ when the villains would attack. Everything would burst out, the kids would get into their fighting stances, and villains would pour out like a tsunami. Mob would be there trying his best. Not really trying his best, being his best. Taking out villains with ease. Any villain that got towards him got a psychic gust of wind and got knocked back a couple of meters. Mob was just walking through until he realized a real opponent had arrived. He didn't know how, but he sensed it with his psychic abilities. It was almost like a soul was trapped into a monstrous body, and he could feel the soul crying out for help. The soul was dead inside, but its body was still moving. This is the hallmark of a Nomu. Since Nomus are literally just people being morphed into monsters and having quirks stuffed into them until they become a mold of the evil doctor and All For One, their souls would be dead. And Mob, being a psychic who can sense ghosts and sense souls, will be able to sense all of the Nomu. Sensing all of the Nomu is an incredibly useful skill. Skipping past that for a moment, Deku runs up towards Aizawa as Aizawa's head is about to get crushed. But right when it does, Mob Psycho 100 would appear. He would appear right in front of the Nomu, and the great fight between Mob and the Nomu would now begin. This battle, I think, would be a fierce one, as Mob doesn't really go all out. Using about 5 or 15% of his powers, he's able to just keep the Nomu at bay, putting up a psychic shield, stopping his attacks from really hurting him, but it was applying the pressure. It was faster than Mob, and every little counterattack that he would hit it with, he would just counterattack with an even stronger attack. This was kind of a challenge for 15% Mob Psycho. So 15% Mob, giving his best against his Nomu, would just stand there as his teammates watched him take the grunt. Ida would run off to get All Might, and Aizawa would watch on as a student steps up to defend him. Aizawa was in awe. He wanted to help, but by this point, both of his legs were kinda not working, and Deku was just kinda fodder. Uraraka would stare in awe as the odd boy that she sat next to at lunch saved everyone's lives. Mob, attracting the attention of the Nomu, would take it to a safer place, a more secluded area of the USJ where he could use his full powers and go all out. Aizawa noticed that Mob was backing up into this clear area. This kid was so smart. All of his uses were to keep everybody else safe. He was a true hero, using his powers in such a way that detracted the villain's attention and drew him away from civilians. It was brilliant. I mean, for a high schooler, it really was something. Watching Mob step back, Aizawa noticed something. He still wasn't going all out yet. He was stepping back so he could use the full grunt of his powers. This kid was dangerous. I mean, I think Mob would be up there in terms of Todoroki type talent. I mean, he's better than Todoroki. Mob is the most talented person in Class 1A. By far, hands down. He's up there, his quirk is up there with Fukiyomi, Todoroki. It surpasses them in a lot of aspects just because of its raw power. Mob, backing up, gets the Nomu into a nice corner where he unlocks 25% of its power. And 25% of his power is enough to knock the Nomu back, injuring it severely. It doesn't take the Nomu down quite yet, but it hurts it. As Mob does not know the key to destroying this Nomu is to smack the I can't say that word. Smack the hell out of its brain or its head or whatever the hell that Nomu has. You know what I'm talking about. He simply just tries his best to deal bodily attacks, not really going for a head, as it's kind of graphic for a high schooler to smash some monster's brains out. Come on, they're just in high school, guys. So, Mob trying his best to weaken this Nomu by attacking its legs, its arms, its torso, its neck even, was just not working. He hadn't had the idea to hit it with a headshot yet. He was gradually increasing his power as his threshold was getting better. Mob's timeout. Mob's countdown was now beginning, and you guys know what I'm talking about. His countdown to 100. Mob was now about at 10% at the moment, just through living daily life over the past couple months. He'd worked up his countdown to about 10%, and now we're gonna say that Mob's countdown was at 25, maybe 40%. Yeah, we're gonna up it to 40%, because I think him seeing Aizawa getting his leg smashed and almost died would make him pretty angry. Maybe even 60%. I mean, that's something graphic for Mob to witness. So, Mob at 60% anger and 25% power really is having enough of this Nomu's shit. I said it, it's too late now. He bulks up and goes 40%. Now, I think 40% will be enough to, put this Nomu aside and really get rid of him, but you can argue, and I don't really want to be on that side of the argument, but you can argue that the Nomu would survive a 40% Mob Psycho attack, as, it can absorb and, reuse power. It was doing it against All Might, and All Might was like 75, maybe 100%, and, Mob's up there with All Might in terms of raw power. So you could say that 40% Mob wouldn't get it done, but it would be enough to make him the one standing up on top of the Nomu. It's not really the Nomu who's winning the fight now. It's more not Mob just beating on the Nomu, and it's just not going down for good, because it keeps on it's just that durable. It's just not going down. So Mob, noticing this, would try his best to amp up his power, but he couldn't do it. Guys, remember, Mob really doesn't use his power all that much, so it's hard for him to really amp it up, and it's hard for him to really gather that energy to amp it up, because amping up his psychic abilities does take a lot of energy from Mob. We see that in a lot of fights where he's getting his ass kicked, and that's when he really uses the full brunt of his abilities, because he doesn't really let it all out all that often. So Mob would be his best trying to gather up some more power so he can just end the battle, and that's when All Might would arrive. All Might would pull up in classic All Might fashion, slacking his tie, talking to Aizawa a bit, and walking over to where the battle is being held. He sees a scuffed up Mob. He was expecting to see a half-dead boy, but Mob was holding on pretty easily. I mean, his uniform was a bit dirty, but that was all. Maybe a couple bruises on his face. All Might looks at the kid, and then he steps up to be the hero that everybody needed. All Might would punch the Nomu, and he would go ham, buffing up, going into his full power. He would go ham on this Nomu. We're not going to get the epic clash of the full-powered Nomu versus full-powered All Might. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're just going to see All Might arrive, give the Nomu like 5 or 6 smashes, and then just do a big Delaware smash to the Nomu's head and call it a KO. All Might didn't really have to go all out. He didn't even get deflated in the end. So he was really okay. And everybody in the USJ was pretty okay. We have been overlooking somebody else though, Shigaraki. What would Shigaraki be doing in all this? I think Shigaraki would just be watching as he was waiting for All Might to arrive, and when he sees his prize Nomu still get smashed, he still teleports away. I don't think Shigaraki would have made a move against Mob or anything like that, because honestly this wasn't really an attack to, you know, kill All Might or kill all the kids. This just was to see what All Might was doing and see what was going on. This wasn't really a main Shigaraki attack. This was like the beginning of everything. So I don't think Shigaraki would step up and ever put himself in immediate danger just for a stupid Nomu, you know? So we go past all of this, and I think we're going to cover more of the story, as it's not to an hour yet, so we can cover a lot more in this story. So after the USJ, everything in canon, you know, Mob gets a lot of praise from not only his teammates, but the teachers in UA. He's kind of floating around as a legend in UA now. He's up there with, you know, the UA Big 3. He's kind of like the kid who, you know, helped All Might. He's looking like a little All Might sidekick, kind of overshadowing Deku, because everybody compares him to All Might in terms of raw power. You know, he has enough power to keep up with a Nomu that All Might destroyed, and a Nomu that beat the hell out of Aizawa, you know, a top tier hero. So he has enough, you know, raw power to be one of the greatest heroes of all time, and he's getting the praise around UA for that. When he gets home, everything really goes great for him, and for the first time, he's really celebrated by his family. He loves the rush of being a hero, and he loves the feeling of saving people. He's really getting into this entire UA lifestyle thing. He's kind of now into it for more than just Uraraka. Mob enjoys his time with his family, and his brother smiles at him in a sad but happy way. You can tell that his brother's happy for him when they're all eating dinner, but he's kind of sad too, because he sees his brother look at his spoon and he's still trying to bend it with his mind, and he can't. His brother is quirkless, and there's nothing Mob can ever do to change that. And that's when Mob would find out that day that his brother had got accepted into UA High. Mob's brother was now going to be a part for the general studies course in UA High. He would be providing assistance to sidekicks and, you know, becoming a part of the managing brand of agencies. That's his study, general studies. And Mob was excited and happy to have his brother come along. His brother would skip a grade because he's so smart and come directly out of middle school into UA. He has to be a genius to do that. Anybody who's doing that is extremely gifted. And I think if we all know Mob's brother from Mob Psycho 100, we know that Mob's brother is something who can skip a grade. He can do that. He's smart as hell. So Mob Psycho's brother would become a member of the UA High School around week 2 when Mob is there. So Mob has somebody he can go talk to lunch to who's not, you know, Uraraka and her clique, which really spreads Mob's, like, his influence even more, because he's the brother to that super genius who got let in on his grades alone, the kid who skipped a grade, and his brother is the monster known as Mob Psycho. Mob started to begin developing an alias. He's like a legend around campus now. Everybody knows Mob by week 3, And as time comes on, Mob is informed about the the UA Sports Festival. This would become a big deal for everybody, as they were all hyping up Mob, and the main event of the entire sports festival was now becoming marketed towards Mob on the internet, from his classmates simply just loving him that much. I think everything with the class reps and class presidents is gonna go just like in canon. I don't want to change everything. Mob is definitely not stepping up for class candidate. You can make the assumption that since Mob is so popular, maybe somebody would, nominate him, but I don't think Mob would even be interested, and even if he got it, he would just give the role to somebody. So everything goes like in canon. When all the news anchors and stuff pull up to the UA High and start making all that noise, Mob would not be the one to step up. I think it would still be Deku to step up, and Ida to really get everybody going, and Ida still becomes class rep. So everything there is in canon. Any little stuff that I have to follow, just automatically assume that it's in canon if I'm missing off any little stuff, and we can go straight towards the UA Sports Festival. Everything with Deku kind of goes in canon. However, the thing about this sports festival is Deku and Bakugo's rivalry as strong right now. Bakugo still kind of just hates Deku for being Deku and breathing the same air as Bakugo, so you can argue that their, rivalry is going to be still as tense as ever, but I don't really think so. I think that since Deku didn't slap Bakugo onto the ground in that one test, I think that Bakugo is kind of going to be less, angered at Deku, but still suspicious. Like, why is Deku here? And why is his power so strong? In the sports festival, Mob would really, be surprised to see that people in the crowd knew his name. In the first, sports festival event, when they have to do the big race and stuff, people would be chanting Mob as he lined up in his sports festival uniform. And you can imagine Mob, right? You can imagine him walking up in that Mob style, all slack and stuff, walking up with his bowl haircut, standing there in his sports festival uniform. That's so funny. And you can see him getting ready to race. And I don't think that Mob would use his psychic abilities in this. I think that Mob would want to prove something. Like, he's been in, the athletics club all middle school, so he would try his best to impress his old athletic club mates. They would probably be in the front row or something, cheering Mob on, telling him to go, go, go. And he wouldn't use his psychic abilities to pass this test. Mob would just trudge through, and he would be so slow. He would come dead last, while Bakugo, Deku, and Todoroki still do the same thing. They would steal the main show away from Mob, as people kind of forgot he was even there, as he was slacking behind in the back of the race. So Mob comes last in the first event, just by, being Mob. And we're gonna say that, the second event will go kind of differently. You could say that Mob, Mob is so OP, you can say that anything can really happen, but you can say that Mob, using his abilities, would steal first place or something, but I don't really even think so. I think that Mob is gonna be matched up with an odd pair. He's not gonna really be the one to step up and say, pick me. He's just gonna kind of hang around Uraraka. I don't think he's gonna be on Uraraka's team though. I think that Uraraka is still gonna get scooped up by somebody else like Deku or something, and Mob was just gonna have to watch on as they walk away from him awkwardly, and he's gonna join some reject team, and he's gonna come around the middle of the pack. So Mob is pretty low on the leaderboards. Most of the people here came to see Mob wild out, but he's kind of taking the L right now until the combat portion of the sports festival. Now this the combat portion of the sports festival, this would go crazy for Mob. I think that this is, the people would get what they came for in this point. Mob, he's not a pushover. He doesn't really like to use his abilities to harm anybody, but he's not a pushover. If he's gonna lose this, he's not going to, really gonna lose. He doesn't care at the end of the day. He's Mob, but I don't think he would really want to lose this, and I don't think he would really want to disappoint the people at the athletics club. All his old middle school friends come to see him, and I don't think he would try to disappoint them. And Uraraka, he wouldn't try to disappoint her. So since Mob was middle of the pack, we're gonna say that he's gonna be going in a later round. So after Deku and Shinzo, really cool match by the way, even after Bakugo and Uraraka, and seeing Uraraka lose is gonna kind of fuel Mob up a lot. And I think that's the main thing that's gonna drive him to actually attack somebody with his psychic powers. We're gonna say that Mob is gonna match up with, I want to give him a good matchup. So we're gonna say that Mob is gonna match up with the guy with multiple quirks. Let me Google his name. Give me 2 seconds. It's Nato Momoma. Is that how I say it? Is it? I'm just gonna call him. Oh, it's Nato Monoma. Okay. And he's a guy who can, he's a guy who can steal quirks and stack them up. Really cool ability. Definitely deserves to level up, and he's one of the guys who deserves kind of to be in 1A. And so he's gonna be leveling up, going up against him. Really, really good quirk, really, really good power, and I think he's gonna actually steal Mob's quirk. I don't really know where I want to go with this. Does Mob have the quirk ability? Is his ability a quirk, or is it just psychic abilities are considered quirks? Just because people don't know that they're psychic abilities, they just consider them quirks. Maybe, I don't know. But we're gonna say that whatever it is, that this Mado guy, he steals Mob's quirk, and even if he gets Mob's quirk, he's not gonna know how to use it as good as Mob. Even if you have the same power as Mob, you're not gonna be as good as Mob, just because Mob is just Mob. His brother has pretty much the same psychic abilities as him in Mob Psycho 100 when he does get his abilities or whatever, and he's not as strong as Mob just because Mob is Mob. So even if he had Mob's abilities, I think that he's still gonna take the L because Mob is just gonna ramp it up to 30% and slap him. At 15%, Mob is doing pretty good against this kid because he was doing pretty good against Nomu, so imagine. So Mob would slap this kid out of the way, and the people would get what they paid for. The crowd would go wild as Mob just stood there like that was easy, and the athletic club would be shocked, jaws hanging low. Remember, they didn't even know that Mob was applying for UA, so imagine when they see this. Mob was really becoming a legend. So Mob would do that, and he would go in the back, wait for everybody, and you would see Endeavor pulling up to Deku and stuff and being like, yeah, not Endeavor, but Todoroki, and being like, yo, are you related to All Might? And Mob was just there on the sidelines just because he's such an unnoticeable character. He's just blending in with the walls, and he's just watching all of this go down. So Mob kind of has a down low of everything that's going down with the situation. And he's kind of like the fourth wheel to the Todoroki, Bakugo, Deku trio. He's kind of becoming like the fourth guy, just hanging out in the background like, hey, I'm Mob too. And everything like that. I think that's where we're gonna end it. We're gonna cover the rest of the sports festival and stuff maybe in the next 1 hour special. I want to do this again, I definitely do. This is really fun, just rambling on about what I think is gonna happen if Mob was in there. I really like this style of video. I'm gonna be doing this more a lot. And yeah, I love this and I love you guys. We're gonna end it here. I have a lot of thoughts. I want to jump in the next one. Some stuff I think that will happen. Mob's brother is still in UA. He has to level up too. Mob's brother is definitely gonna be leveling up in this. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe. Like I said in all of my videos, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Let's pick up where we last left off, with Mob going up against Deku in the sports festival. Now, we said before we said that Mob is beloved by everybody in the sports festival. He's really the main attraction that attracted a large, huge crowd toward UA. Everybody's starting to hear about the infamous Mob Psycho as he's grinding to the top. He becomes one of the top students at UA High, only around 4 to 3 months into his first year at the school. He is around the same infamy as the UA Big Three, the 3 oldest and most powerful students in the school. Yeah, Mob is at that level of popularity. And with this 1v1 versus Deku, he might climb even higher. Mob knows that Deku, being one of his supposed friends, he probably should go easy on him, so he decides that's what he's going to do. Go easy on Deku and spare him some embarrassment. Maybe Uraraka would like him more that way. She probably wouldn't like it if he thrashed one of her best friends. Yeah, Mob is kind of simping out for Uraraka right now, but we're not going to talk about it. So the battle now begins. Deku versus Mob, the thing that most of the people here were waiting for. They heard about the new kid with the super strength quirk similar to All Might's, and they of course know about Mob's Psycho 100, probably the most powerful student to ever grace the halls of UA High. The battle would begin with Deku taking the offensive. Deku would burst off. Like in canon, of course, he wasn't able to use the 100% one for all, or even probably 10% one for all. He was going to be using each finger that he had in his hands, all 10 of them, breaking them, simultaneously trying to get an attack off at Mob. Mob, using his psychic abilities, would easily dodge these attacks from Deku, these bursts of winds being flown off of Deku's broken bones. Mob, sidestepping all these attacks, would come straight head-on, face-to-face with Deku, where, like I said before, he would take it easy. He would throw a punch to Deku. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the hell? A punch? Come on, guys. You know what Mob's like. That punch would land so weakly on Deku's face, it would flop off. Even Deku would be surprised, shocked. They both stood there for about 2 seconds, staring at each other. The crowd would gasp, waiting for the aftershock of that punch, but nothing would happen. As Deku recovers, stepping back, he aims an attack towards Mob, pricking one of his fingers, letting off a burst of wind, which actually hits Mob, sending him flying. Mob would barrel back towards the edge of the ring, but in the nick of time, he saves himself. Using his psychic powers, he pushes himself back towards the ring and hovers back towards the middle of the battlefield. As Mob hovers back towards the middle of the battlefield, Deku would start to take steps backwards towards his side of the ring, trying to gain his breath and recover from having multiple bones broken in his fingers. It hurts so badly, but he knows he has to push and persevere. He's not doing this for himself, he's doing this so he can carry on All Might's legacy. Deku would of course barrel back towards Mob once he finished regaining a little bit of his stamina. Mob would decide he couldn't let that attack happen again. It may make him look pretty weak. So he decides, heck it, I'm just gonna hit Deku with a semi-decent attack, breaking him down a little bit, but not enough to throw him out of the ring. He's gonna play with Deku some more before trying his best to get Deku out of the match. And he's gonna throw the match a little bit, allowing Deku to get pretty close to him and get ready to swing an actual one-for-all punch at him, something that Todoroki would never let Deku do. Mob, however, sidesteps his attack so easily using his psychic abilities, hovering, it almost looked like he knew it was going to happen minutes before it actually did. Kinda like he had observation hockey from One Piece. He sidesteps that punch and lets off a psychic attack. Raising his left arm, his power raises with him and sends Deku barreling in a 90-degree angle towards the edge of the ring. Mob knew this was bad. He had put a little bit too much spice on that attack, so he decides to do something really stupid. He uses his psychic abilities to pull Deku back towards the ring. He tried to do it as subtly as possible, but I think people might have noticed. However, the match wasn't called and they continued fighting. I think the people in the crowd were kind of starting to pick up that Mob wasn't being entirely serious about this battle. Murmurs start around the crowd as the battle would draw near the 2-minute mark. I think we're gonna set a 5-minute mark, finish line for this battle. I don't know exactly how long the time limit is in the UA entrance exam. I'm probably gonna have to look that up. But I think we're gonna say once 5 minutes come, that's when the bell's gonna ring and it's gonna be called a draw. So Deku, Mob continue to go on. So like I said before, it was around 2 minutes into the battle and the battle would start to seem a little bit fake. Deku in the heat of it could never pick up on this, but people watching from afar could start to pick up on it. Mob wasn't being entirely serious. Deku would barrel back towards Mob, again being on the offensive, but this time he had a trick up his sleeve. He was going to try his best to hit Mob with a head-on attack. That would damage him greatly, opening Mob up for another head-on attack. Deku had prepped his left finger, getting ready to blast Mob with an air blast, and he does. That creates a diversion, allowing Deku to duck under that same wind blast, covering him, so Mob couldn't see that he was drawing near. What he didn't know was that Mob could sense him from a mile away. Mob sees Deku with his psychic abilities, but just pretends he doesn't. When Deku draws near him, he acts shocked, saying, "Oh," in a simple voice. Looking down at him, he gets hit square on in the chin with a 100% one-for-all smash. Maybe 100% is too much. Let's say it was a 25% on one-for-all smash, but still, it did no damage nonetheless. You can imagine Mob's head kind of bobbling back as the attack would land weakly. His head was still stable, it was just smoking. A little bit like One Punch Man when he gets punched in the head in that one episode of the anime, when he just stands there and his head just wobbles back and forth. Mob would then look towards Deku, thinking, uh-oh, was I supposed to fake being hurt there? Oh well. He raised his right arm and sends another psychic attack towards Deku, but this time he made sure to hit Deku so he's just in the ring. Unlike the prior attacks where Mob would just stand still waiting for Deku to get back up, he decided to follow after this attack just to make it look a little bit more real. So after hitting Deku to the edge of the ring, Mob would use his psychic abilities, hovering towards Deku at a pretty fast speed, looking like he was about to get Deku out once and for all. Deku would barrel back towards the edge of the ring, flipping around in a circle, landing on his knees, skidding. He was almost outside the ring when Mob approached him. Deku was smart, using one for all, powering up his leg. Unlike in canon, where he would never really use his leg, he broke his right leg, pushing himself barreling towards Mob. He would power up one of his fingers, mid-powering up one of his legs. This is something that Deku would never learn to do until later on, but this fight towards Mob is pushing him to surpass his limits. He's going plus ultra. So, breaking his leg and breaking his finger, he lets off a big gust of wind which propels him directly towards Mob in an extremely fast pace. Using his finger, he would sidestep Mob, blowing the wind directly at Mob, causing Deku to move in a sideways angle. Mob would be shocked, raising his arm trying to let off a psychic attack. Deku would get serious, landing back, breaking his other leg, barreling towards Mob. Deku powered up his already broken right arm for another smash when the match was called. Mob had picked up a massive piece of the broken arena and was getting ready to smash it on top of Deku. Deku looked up to see this hurling boulder above his head. If they didn't stop right there, Deku would have definitely died. So Cementos gets in between them, creating a barrier for them, and the match is called a draw. Mob is really happy. He got the match to be a draw, and he didn't have to go all out against Deku. I wonder what Uraraka would think about this entire thing, he thought. So he and Deku talk a little bit. Mob would say, "Good match, Deku," before walking off smiling. Even though the match was called a draw, Mob looked really happy for some reason. Deku was broken and beaten. He fainted weakly. He wasn't going to be able to get up and fight again in the UA Sports Festival, basically disqualifying him from any other round that he would have participated in. As Mob advances, Mob walks jollily to the sidelines. Seeing Uraraka, he says, "Hey, Uraraka." Uraraka would walk over to him, getting close to him. Mob would start to realize, I just said hey to Uraraka, and she's walking over here now. And that cool confidence that he just had would turn into an awkward silence as soon as Uraraka got face to face with him. She congratulated him and gave him a hug. Mob would blush heavily, rubbing the back of his head as Uraraka got ready for her match against Bakugo. Now, Uraraka vs. Bakugo is a terrible match that Mob will have to watch, and I think we can all say that Mob would be extremely pissed and angry seeing Uraraka getting beaten down by a savage Bakugo. As everything goes like in canon, Uraraka would try to do what Deku did, creating a smart strategy to inch herself towards Bakugo and hopefully get the win. But Bakugo was too talented, too naturally skilled, and he slapped Uraraka in this match. But knowing Mob, you really think that he would ever let that slide? His meter would start to build up during this match. He would get angrier and angrier. Like I said before, Mob was around 60% this entire time he was in UA. He had slowly been building up that meter. During this fight, Mob's meter would go all the way up to 90%. He was so pissed. He was almost bursting with rage, seeing Uraraka getting beaten down by Bakugo. He was going to get revenge for her. After the match, Uraraka was going to be rushed towards the healers. As Mob stepped up, the next round would begin versus he and Todoroki. Todoroki and Mob had no big kind of relationship whatsoever. They were acquaintances and classmates, so Mob felt that he could go a little bit more serious against Todoroki. Todoroki, of course, was a lot stronger than Deku, just with his ice powers alone. So it would be a little bit more of a quote-unquote challenge from the viewer's eyes, but from Mob's perspective, it was as easy as cake. Todoroki, just like in canon, versus fight against Deku, would take the defensive, using his ice powers to create a blockade, while also creating an offensive attack at the same time. Mob would take the offensive, which he rarely does in any of his battles, as he's afraid of hurting people with his amazing abilities. He would burst off, flying full force towards Todoroki. Mob was extremely fast using his psychic abilities to fly, so each one of these blocks of ice barreling towards him was going to be easily dodged, and then sometimes Mob would just barrel through them, breaking through the ice, kind of like Goku in Dragon Ball Z would just break through a massive mountain flying to the other side of it. It was crazy. Mob barreled towards Todoroki. Getting really close to him, he would spin around in the 360 motion, gathering up psychic power and letting it all go towards Todoroki. Todoroki stood no chance. He put up a massive ice blockade and was almost knocked out of the ring in under 30 seconds flat. After that attack from Mob, Todoroki was in the middle of ice, freezer burnt to all hell because he couldn't use his ice abilities for that much without some serious drawbacks, dangling off the edge of the arena. The crowd went wild. This is what they all paid to see. The Mob Psycho 100 kid go off during the sports festival. Everybody had their phones out at this moment, and you can imagine the goddamn energy in that arena. So Mob would of course look up towards the crowd and everybody screaming for him. He would be taken off guard. Landing back on his 2 feet at the ground of the arena, he looked around stunned. This is the first time that he ever felt this kind of love, this kind of admiration, and this kind of feeling. He always felt like an outcast for his abilities. He always felt that he didn't want them. He always felt that they were a burden. They stopped him from having real relationships with people because he was just simply too powerful. He could mess up at any moment, and that could spell danger for anybody he was close to. But at this moment, he felt proud for himself. He felt strong, and he felt good to be powerful. Meanwhile, all this was happening, Todoroki would look towards Endeavor and get a certain feeling. Maybe he should use his fire. Maybe these abilities weren't just something that could remind him of his terrible past. Maybe they were a way to move on. These weren't his father's abilities. These were his. It's not his father's fire. It's his. And so he uses his fire. Hearing the cheers from Mob in the crowd and seeing his father's obvious resentment and disappointment in him, you think that he would be happy, but no. Todoroki was not happy. He was angry. And that fire and rage built up inside of him until the tipping point where it all came out. Todoroki would burst out of the ice as everything melted. his fire would rage on. Mob saw this wreck and quickly he took a few steps back as Todoroki jumped out of the ice and used his fire to create a wall between he and Mob. He would walk out of that fire like an evil villain would walk out of a fire, just simply spreading it across using his powers, getting ready for his turn to be on the offensive. He let off 2 slashes of fire that came barreling towards Mob. Mob had barely dodged the first one, but the second one he handled easily. Todoroki wasn't gonna let that slide though. Todoroki then slides on his ice, getting close to Mob, inching up next to him on his right hand side. He would use his right side of his body to let off a fire attack on his right, causing Mob to go towards his left, which Todoroki would let off an ice wall, leaving Mob clearly trapped with fire on his right and ice on his left. All he had to do simply was push Todoroki back, but could he do that? If he did, he would seriously hurt the kid. Todoroki could go barreling to either the left or the right, and he would be seriously hurt. Mob, thinking about Todoroki, had no time to think about himself. He gets hit with a head-on attack from Todoroki. Todoroki would use his fire, burning Mob. Mob, of course, uses his psychic abilities to engulf himself in a shield. The fire didn't really hurt him. It was just hot on the outside. It never really penetrated the shield or got towards his skin. But that's not how it looked towards the crowd. It looks like the student that they just been cheering for had been engulfed in flames. They all froze for about 5 seconds until they saw a purple glow emit from this massive ball of fire. Mob would burst out of this ball of fire, flying up towards the UA Sports Festival. He flew up high. He was now on the same level as the crowd. As he came barreling down, he balled up his fists, getting ready for a psychic attack. He carried all that energy that he built up, flying up behind him, and smashed it down towards the ground, almost like a superhero landing. Like Superman would land on the ground carrying all that energy with him. The arena collapsed. The tiles flew up from the ground as Todoroki flew like a trampoline, like he was on a trampoline or something. He flew up like the ground was made of rubber. It was crazy. Todoroki was now up in the sky and Mob, landing on the floor, barreled back up towards Todoroki, grabbing him in the middle of the air. He spun around in 360 again, throwing him on the ground. Something that was not very Mob, but Mob was kind of pissed off at this point. He would of course realize what he did as Todoroki was barreling down towards the ground like he was about to be a bug getting squashed on a windshield. Mob would of course use his psychic abilities to save Todoroki last second, and at that moment, the match was called. This had become way too much. The teachers were now on the edge of their seats. It almost looked like one of their students was going to die again. This Mob kid was scary as hell. They called the match in Mob's favor as Todoroki walked off, seriously injured. He would be sat right next to Deku in that same little hospital chamber at the UA Sports Festival. This was a brutal matchup to face. The crowd would scream Mob's name as Mob looked up smiling. His face would be placed on the intercom, and he looked around, almost like a godly figure in a coliseum or something. And now it was time for the final matchup versus Bakugo, the man who had just beat the hell out of Mob's crush. He was definitely gonna crush him. Anyway guys, that's gonna be the end of the episode. I hate to blue ball you guys here, but I think this is the perfect ending. In the next episode, we're gonna cover the last final matchup against Bakugo in the sports festival, and we're gonna be moving on to a new arc, the Stain arc. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that part. Tell me which parts you guys enjoyed. Theorize down there in the comments. And if you want more of this video and this series, of course, like the video. If you're new around here, subscribe. It's cool to see new people and new faces. Like I said at the end of all my videos, like and subscribe, all that fun jazz, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Where we last left off, Mob was pissed off about Bakugo beating up on his crush, Uraraka, in the UA Sports Festival. Mob had never felt like this before. His meter was building up. It was almost at its peak. It was sitting around 90%. He was pissed off at Bakugo and was going to get revenge for what he did to Uraraka. He wasn't playing around this time. In all the previous matches, he had taken it easy on his opponent. On Deku, he took it pretty easy. On Todoroki, he took it easy enough. But on Bakugo? No. There was no way he was going to hold back against this guy. The match starts up with massive hype from the crowd. Everybody is bursting at the seams to see this. Bakugo had gone through his own little thing on his side of the tournament bracket, and Mob had gone through his own little thing on his side of the tournament bracket. The best of the best in UA had finally matched up. Bakugo saw this as his chance to grab Mob's seat as one of the top, up-and-coming heroes in not only UA, but really the hero community and the world at large. Because, like I was saying before, Mob Psycho's fame was growing. He wasn't on that level yet, but he was approaching it pretty quickly, especially for a first year. So both of them entered this extremely seriously. The match starts, and immediately, the both of them go to their own sides of the arena. Bakugo burst back, awaiting Mob's attack, and Mob does the same. The two stare at each other, and the cheering crowd quiets. The tension in the air was palpable. Everything was stiff, as everyone awaited the both of these young kids' attacks. The person to go first would be Mob. Mob, angered, losing his cool head, would jump out, attacking Bakugo. This is exactly what Bakugo was hoping for. He had seen that Mob's anger had visibly increased after what he had did to Uraraka. Bakugo was no fool. Even though he was an angry, hard-headed, Bakugo, he's still, of course, a prodigy and one of the best heroes. One of the best young heroes, at least. So he picked up on Mob's change in mood and in attitude. Smirking his teeth, he waits as Mob charges head onto him like a bull. As soon as Mob gets, close enough to actually attack Bakugo, Bakugo uses explosion and sidesteps to the right, hoping that Mob would go off the side of the arena. Mob sees this and just at the nick of time, uses his psychic abilities to fly upwards and do a flip mid-air. Landing back down, Bakugo burst off towards Mob, letting off an explosion using his left hand, and then with his right, pushed off so he would fly back. Mob would use his psychic abilities to simply block this explosion, letting off a small slash of psychic energy. But Bakugo had sidestepped that, like I said before, using his right hand, and so just in the nick of time, he dodges Mob's slash of energy. Landing back on his feet, Bakugo does a couple flips in the air, pushing himself backwards towards the opposite side of the arena to get as far away from Mob as possible. He then yells, "Mob, you're a weirdo just like Deku, and you both have the thing for that girl Uraraka. Did you know what I used to do to Deku in middle school? I'll do the same thing to you." This pisses Mob off even more, and he charges directly towards Bakugo. Bakugo had just laid a trap for Mob, and he smiles as he waves his red flag, and Mob, enraged like the bull, charges once again. He would use the same strategy. Instead of dodging to the left, he dodges to the right, and using his left hand, he backs off as he lets off an explosion. Mob, knowing this, would block, and then, instead of setting a slash, would immediately be on Bakugo. But Bakugo lets off an even bigger explosion, causing him to fly into the air. This was becoming an aerial battle. Mob would use his psychic abilities to, of course, hover up in the air, and the two would meet midair. Mob, who lets off an actual physical attack, getting close enough to Deku, spinning around in the 360 motion, except this physical attack, unlike his sponge that he had used on Deku earlier on Bakugo, actually did something, because he had charged it up, spinning it around in midair, focusing his his magic, I don't really know what to call Mob's power, his psychic energy, sorry guys, focusing his psychic energy into that one physical attack using his right fist, punching Bakugo back down, cracking the arena when Bakugo lands. Then he would be immediately on Bakugo. There was no letting up in this match. Immediately charging down for the insta-kill, he would look up and see a small grenade. It exploded, causing Mob to hurl back down towards the ground. He didn't know about this, and so didn't use his psychic abilities to block it. Bakugo's trap had worked. Bakugo emerges from this hole in the ground, smiling, as smoke covers the arena. None of the crowd could see what was happening. And you guys may be like, oh my gosh, Bakugo is cheating, but no. Remember, this isn't against the rules. You can use support items in these battles. Bakugo screams as the smoke covers the arena. Is this all you've got, Mob Psycho 100? Ha ha. I guess you really don't care about that girl after all. You'd have tried harder to protect her. Mob, laying on the floor, opens his eyes. He is enraged, and his meter goes up. Previously at a 90, it is now at a 95%. He cannot take it anymore. Bakugo is getting on his last nerve. He suddenly pops up and yells as he charges towards him. I'm gonna kill you. This is very unlike Mob. And in a nick of time, before Bakugo even realizes it, Mob is standing before him. As the smoke clears, what everyone in the crowd sees, no one would imagine. Mob was standing there, holding Bakugo by his neck, choking him. He then slams Bakugo into the ground again. The crowd erupts with cheers, and Mob had just realized what he had done. He had almost let his anger get the best of him. He looks around, surprised and stunned, and kind of disgusted by himself. He backs up and falls on the ground. The attack that he had just done to Bakugo left Bakugo stranded in a crater and unconscious. Mob had just won the battle, but at the cost of his own self-control. He had almost let his anger boil up to a point of no return. The crowd then continues to escalate the situation. They start chanting Mob, 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 as Mob looks around staring at him. He was truly the king gladiator of this coliseum. After everything, after the end of the sports festival, Mob would be walking home, where he'd be greeted with a healed Uraraka coming out to see him. She was in a cast, and Ida, Todoroki, and pretty much all of the other Class 1A students had come to congratulate Mob on his victory. Mob would immediately looking around to see if he could see Deku and Bakugo. Uraraka would then tell him that Deku and Bakugo were going to be in the hospital for a little bit longer. She smiles at him and tilts her head, getting super close to Mob, causing him to be really awkward. I mean, he had almost let out his full power for this person. This was super weird, but she inched closer and closer until Mob fell over in embarrassment. Everyone in the class laughed, as all the other members of Class 1A dispersed. Uraraka and Mob would decide to stay back, waiting for Deku and Bakugo to be dispatched by Recovery Girl. They're going to be dispatched later on that day, and as such, they would just simply wait outside the school exit, simply, wishing to see their friends and kind of their, opponents, their matchups. This entire interaction would be extremely awkward, but Mob got to know Uraraka a lot better in this. They would talk for a long time, and Mob would actually get to know that Uraraka is a pretty cool person. Mob would then tell Uraraka about the fact that Mob had gone to the same middle school, which Uraraka somehow forgot. She treated Mob as a person that he had just met, not knowing that they had kind of known each other or were acquaintances in middle school. This shocked Uraraka and kind of brought them even closer than before. Once, their riveting conversation was done, Bakugo and Deku would come out. Bakugo on the right and Deku on the left. Bakugo would nod his head at Mob and then walk away, mumbling something under his breath. Stupid psycho. Then Deku would come and congratulate Mob on his win. He had heard the news from All Might and Recovery Girl about everything. He and Uraraka would talk, and Mob was kinda jealous about the way that they interacted. He could tell that Deku had a thing for her. Deku, he thought. But beyond this, everything else pretty much ends in a nice, neat way, wrapping the entire UA Sports Festival arc in a bow. We now fade out to Shigaraki. He was watching everything. He had seen it. Mob Psycho 100. The way that you grabbed that kid, you would think that you truly were a psychic. Anyway, guys, that's going to be the end of this part. It was a really short part. It's the shortest part I've made so far. If you guys haven't noticed, I've been dropping a lot of like 12-minute videos, 15-minute videos, and this kind of fits in that, kind of new, smaller video thing. The next part will be longer because we're going to be covering a bigger arc, obviously. The Stain arc and everything that goes on with, the Quirk apprehension and, like all the training and all that. We're gonna have to give Mob his own, trainer and everything like that. So tune in for the next part, which will be dropping a lot sooner. I'm not gonna be taking these 3-month gaps. If a series is something that you guys want, simply tell me and I will get on it ASAP. If you want another part of this, spam me up. I'll make it and I'll drop it the next day. I don't really care about anything like that. I changed my schedule like 2 times this week because of fan interactions. People told me to drop, what if Deku gave up on Bakugo, and I dropped that. People told me to drop this, and I was planning on dropping it next week, but I'll just drop it. If you guys want me to drop something, I'll listen to you. That's all I really want to say. Check out my social medias. The link to the JBT Discord server will be down below. Hopefully I'll see you there. And like I say at the end of all my videos, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz, and I will catch you in the next one. Pikachu Taco, signing out. Peace. Damn, that was a good one.